Morgan had been living on the space station for 6 months when her life turned upside down. She was 22 years old, and she was one of the first humans ever allowed to study at the Academy. The Academy was famous across the galaxy. Students came from over 50 different planets to learn here. They studied science and politics and art and everything else that mattered in the galactic community. Felt lucky to be here, even though most of the alien students treated her like she was some kind of wild animal. The thing was that Earth had a bad reputation. The aliens called it a. They said the gravity was too strong and the air was full of poison and the weather could kill you. They said humans were dangerous creatures who ate the flesh of other animals and fought each other for fun. Tried to explain that humans were not monsters, but most aliens did not want to listen. They had already made up their minds about her species. Spent most of her time alone. She studied in the library and ate her meals in her small room and tried not to cause any trouble. Her liaison officer was a man named Grant. He was 53 years old and he had worked for the human embassy for 15 years. Visited once a week to check on her, and he always told her the same thing. Just keep your head down and do your work and everything will be fine. Believed him because she had no reason not to. Then she met. There were tall beings made of living crystal. Their bodies were translucent and they glowed with soft light from inside. They were beautiful to look at, but they were also proud and cruel. They believed they were better than everyone else because their civilization was one of the oldest in the galaxy. They had rules about honor and status and family bloodlines that did not fully understand. Was the son of a powerful diplomat. His family had connections in every corner of the galactic government. When he walked through the hallways of the academy, the other students moved out of his way. Even the professors treated him with extra respect. Enjoyed this power, and he enjoyed making others feel small. From the first day he decided that he hated her. He did not hide this feeling. He made comments about her species whenever she was nearby. He called humans primitive and violent and disgusting. He said they did not belong in civilized society. Ignored him as best she could. She knew that fighting back would only make things worse. But was not satisfied with insults. He wanted to hurt her in a way that would stick. He wanted to destroy her future at the academy and send her back to Earth in shame. So he came up with a plan. One evening was studying in the library archives. She was reading about the history of first contact between Earth and the Galactic Union. It was a subject that interested her because she wanted to understand how humans could build a better relationship with the other species. She spent 4 hours in the archives, and she did not leave until the lights dimmed for the night cycle. The next morning, 2 security officers came to her room. Which meant they looked like giant serpents with arms. Their scales were dark green, and their eyes were cold and yellow. They told that she was under arrest for sabotage. She asked them what they were talking about, and they said that she had destroyed the research laboratory of a fellow student named. Felt her stomach drop. She knew immediately that this was a trap. She had never been anywhere near this laboratory. She told the officers this, but they did not care. They had sensor logs that showed a human near the laboratory at the time of the incident. There was only one human on the station, and that was. They put restraints on her wrists and walked her through the main corridor of the academy. Hundreds of students stopped to watch. Some of them whispered to each other and pointed at her. Others looked away as if they were embarrassed to see this happening. Kept her face calm even though her heart was beating fast. She remembered what her father had told her before she left Earth. Never let them see you sweat. They already think we are monsters. Do not give them a reason to believe it. The officers took her to a holding room near the administrative center. Grant arrived 20 minutes later looking worried and angry. He demanded to know what was going on, and the officers showed him the evidence. There were sensor readings and timestamps and a formal accusation signed by himself. Studied the data with a frown on his face. This does not look right, he said. These readings could have been faked. Was in the library last night. The archive system should have records of her presence. The officers did not seem interested in his theory. They said the accusation came from a noble-born student, and that meant an immediate tribunal hearing. There was nothing could do to stop it. The laws of the academy were clear on this matter. Looked at and saw the fear in his eyes. He was afraid for her, and he was also afraid for the future of human relations with the galaxy. If was found guilty, it would prove everything the aliens believed about her species. It would set back the cause of human acceptance by decades. I did not do this, said. You know I would never do something like this. Nodded, I know, kid, but knowing is not enough. We need proof and we do not have much time to find it. The tribunal hearing was scheduled for that same afternoon, had only a few hours to prepare her defense. She sat in the holding room and tried to think of a way out of this situation. The censor logs were fake, but she had no way to prove it. The archive records might show that she was in the library, but that only proved she was not in the laboratory. It did not prove that was lying. She thought about her family back on Earth. Her father was a mechanic who worked on cars in a small town in Montana. Her mother was a nurse who had died when was 17. Her younger brother was still in high school, and he had cried when she left for the stars. She had promised all of them that she would make them proud. She had promised that she would show the galaxy what humans could really be. Now she was sitting in a cold room waiting to be judged for a crime she did not commit. The irony was not lost on her. She had come so far and worked so hard, and none of it mattered. One jealous alien with powerful friends had decided to destroy her, and there was nothing she could do to stop him. Or was there? She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She had been through hard times before. She had survived things that would break most people. Growing up on Earth meant learning to deal with pain and fear and uncertainty. It meant learning to stand up when the world knocked you down. Maybe this situation was impossible. Maybe she was going to lose everything, but she would not give up without a fight. She would walk into that tribunal with her head held high, and she would tell the truth, and she would let them do their worst. Because that was what humans did. They survived. The grand hall of the academy was the largest room had ever seen. The ceiling stretched so high that she could barely see the top. The walls were made of living crystal that hummed with a low vibration she could feel in her bones. Thousands of seats filled the observation galleries, and almost every seat was taken. Students from dozens of species had come to watch the tribunal. News traveled fast on the station, and everyone wanted to see the human face judgment. Stood alone on the central platform. It was a circular stage made of polished white stone that seemed to glow from within. Above her, the 5 members of the tribunal sat on floating platforms that hovered in the air like thrones. Each tribunal member came from a different species. Each one wore robes covered in glowing symbols that marked them as professors of the highest rank. The leader of the tribunal was a named High Arbiter. He was ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species. His scales had faded from green to silver, and his yellow eyes held the weight of centuries. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the hall like thunder. "Human designation, Morgan," he said. "You stand before this tribunal accused of willful destruction of academic property. You are accused of sabotaging the research laboratory of House. The evidence has been presented to this council. How do you answer these charges?" Looked up at the 5 faces staring down at her. She could see the doubt in their eyes. They had already decided she was guilty. They were just going through the motions of a fair hearing. "I am innocent," she said. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber. Several aliens in the gallery flinched at the sound. Human vocal cords produced frequencies that many species found harsh and unsettling. Had learned to speak softly around aliens, but today she did not care about making them comfortable. A murmur passed through the crowd. High Arbiter raised one clawed hand for silence. "The sensor logs show a human presence near the laboratory at the time of the incident," he said. "You are the only human on this station. How do you explain this?" "The logs are fake," said. "I was in the library archives all evening. The archive system should have records of my presence there." "We have reviewed the archive records," the Arbiter replied. "They confirm that you entered the library at the 19th hour and left at the 23rd hour. However, the laboratory incident occurred at the 21st hour. You had time to leave the library and commit the sabotage and return without being noticed." Shook her head. "That is not what happened. Someone fabricated those sensor logs to frame me. I never left the library until I went back to my room." Before the Arbiter could respond, another voice cut through the hall. It was. He walked onto a smaller platform near the tribunal seats, and his crystalline body caught the light in a way that made him seem to glow. His face was arranged in an expression of righteous anger, but could see the smugness underneath. "The lies," he said loudly. "Her kind knows nothing of honor. They are predators who deceive and destroy without conscience. I witnessed her near my laboratory with my own eyes. I saw her flee when she realized she had been caught." "You are lying," said calmly. "I have never been to your laboratory. I do not even know where it is located." Laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "Of course you deny it. That is what your species does. You kill and you steal and then you lie about it. Everyone knows what humans really are. You should never have been allowed on this station in the first place." The crowd murmured in agreement, could feel the hostility in the room like a physical weight pressing down on her. She looked for Grant in the observation gallery and found him standing near the back. He was trying to push forward, but security drones kept blocking his path. Humans had no legal standing to speak in tribunal matters. He could only watch. High Arbiter exchanged glances with the other tribunal members. They spoke to each other in low voices that could not hear. After a long moment, the Arbiter turned back to face her. The evidence presented by Of House meets the threshold for disciplinary action, he said. The censor logs and personal testimony support his accusation. Unless you can provide contradictory proof within this session, the tribunal must rule against you. Felt her heart sink. She had no proof. The archive records only showed when she entered and left the library. They did not track her movements inside. There was no way to prove that she had never left during those 4 hours. She thought about giving up. She thought about accepting whatever punishment they decided to give her and just getting it over with. Maybe they would send her back to Earth in disgrace. Maybe she would spend the rest of her life being known as the human who proved that her species could not be trusted. It would be easier than fighting a battle she could not win. But then she looked at standing there with his smug expression and his glowing crystal body, and she felt something stir inside her. It was not anger exactly. It was something harder and colder than anger. It was determination. She had not come all this way to give up at the first sign of trouble. She had not left her family and her planet and everything she knew just to be destroyed by a spoiled alien with a grudge. If she was going down, she would go down fighting. "What is the punishment?" she asked. Her voice was steady and calm. The tribunal members looked at each other in surprise. Most accused students begged for mercy or tried to bargain for a lighter sentence. None of them asked about the punishment with such cold acceptance. High Arbiter studied her for a long moment. As the injured party of House has the right to request a specific form of discipline, he has invoked an ancient tradition of his people, the resonance trial. A gasp went through the crowd. Did not know what the resonance trial was, but she could tell from the reactions around her that it was something terrible. Several students in the gallery stood up and left as if they could not bear to watch what was coming. Grant shouted something from the back of the room, but the security drones pushed him further away. His face was pale with fear. Looked at and saw his smile widen. He was enjoying this. He wanted to see her suffer. "I accept," she said. The hall fell silent. No one had expected her to accept so quickly. Most accused students fought against the resonance trial with everything they had. They knew what it meant. They knew what it would do to them. But was not most students. She was a human from Earth. And she was not afraid of pain. "Very well," High Arbiter said slowly. "The resonance trial will be administered. May the truth be revealed through suffering." The tribunal members rose from their seats and attendants began moving equipment onto the central platform. Watched them work with a calm expression on her face. Whatever was coming, she would face it with her eyes open. She would not give the satisfaction of seeing her break. She was Morgan. She was a survivor, and this was just the beginning. The attendants brought out 6 tall crystalline pillars and arranged them in a circle around. Each pillar was as thick as her body and stood twice as tall as her. They hummed with energy that made her skin tingle. She could feel vibrations in the air that seemed to pass right through her flesh and touch her bones. A young professor approached the platform. She had silver skin and eyes that shone like polished metal. Her voice was soft, but it carried clearly through the silent hall. "I am Priestess," she said. "I have been assigned to explain the nature of the trial you are about to undergo. The resonance trial is an ancient tradition dating back over 10,000 years. It was designed to test the honesty of the accused through the application of harmonic frequencies that cause intense physical discomfort." She paused and looked at with something that might have been sympathy. "The frequencies will target your nervous system," she continued. "You will experience sensations of burning and freezing at the same time. Your muscles will spasm and your organs will ache. The pain has been described by survivors as the worst experience of their lives. Most beings confess their crimes within the first 30 seconds. The trial lasts for 300 heartbeats, which is approximately 5 minutes by the standard measurement of your planet." Nodded slowly. "And if I do not confess?" she asked. Tilted her head slightly. "No one has ever endured the full duration of the trial. It is considered impossible. The pain is designed to break the will of any sentient being regardless of species or physical constitution." "What happens if I make it to the end?" Then by ancient law you will be declared innocent. But as I said, this has never happened. Not in 10,000 years of recorded history. Looked at the crystalline pillars surrounding her. She thought about what it said. 5 minutes of the worst pain imaginable. 5 minutes that no one had ever survived without breaking. She thought about her life on Earth. Had grown up in a small town in Montana. The winters there were brutal. Temperatures dropped to 40 degrees below zero, and the snow piled so high that it buried houses. She had walked to school through blizzards that would have killed most aliens in seconds. She had learned to split firewood when she was 10 years old because the power went out so often that they needed backup heat to survive. She remembered the summer she turned 12 when a wildfire swept through the hills near her home. The smoke was so thick that she could not see her hand in front of her face. She helped her father dig trenches around their property for 3 days straight with almost no sleep. Her lungs burned and her eyes watered, and her muscles screamed for rest, but she kept digging because her family needed her. She remembered breaking her arm when she was 9. She had fallen from a horse while helping her uncle with the cattle. The bone had snapped clean through, and she could see it poking against her skin from the inside. She was 2 miles from the nearest road. She walked the whole way without crying. Her uncle had been so shocked that he almost fainted when he saw her walking up to the truck with her arm hanging at a wrong angle. She remembered the car accident when she was 16. A drunk driver had crossed into her lane on a dark highway. Her car had flipped 3 times before landing upside down in a ditch. She had crawled out through the shattered window with glass embedded in her back and a gash on her head that needed 40 stitches. The doctors said she should not have been able to move at all. They said the trauma alone should have put her into shock. But had not gone into shock. She had walked half a mile to the nearest house and knocked on the door and asked to use their phone. The family who lived there had screamed when they saw her covered in blood. She had apologized for scaring them. That was what it meant to be human. That was what it meant to come from a. You learned to deal with pain because pain was a constant companion. You learned to push through suffering because suffering was just part of life. The galaxy thought humans were primitive and violent and dangerous. They did not understand that humans were all of those things because their world had forced them to be. Earth was a planet of fire and ice. It was a planet of earthquakes and hurricanes and floods. It was a planet where the very air was slowly poisonous to most galactic species. Humans had evolved in this environment for millions of years. They had developed nervous systems that could handle incredible amounts of damage without shutting down. They had developed minds that could compartmentalize pain and keep functioning even when their bodies were falling apart. The aliens in this room had no idea what they were dealing with. Looked at High Arbiter and nodded. "I am ready," she said. The Arbiter made a gesture, and the crystalline pillars began to glow. The humming sound grew louder and could feel the vibrations intensifying. The air around her seemed to thicken and press against her skin. Watched from his platform with eager eyes. He wanted to see the human break. He wanted to hear her scream and beg and confess. He had waited a long time for this moment. The first wave of pain hit like a hammer made of fire. It started in her chest and spread outward through her arms and legs and into her head. Every nerve in her body seemed to light up at once. She felt like she was being burned alive and frozen solid at the same time. Her muscles locked up and her vision blurred, and for a moment she could not breathe. But she did not scream. She clenched her jaw so hard that she thought her teeth might crack. She forced herself to take a breath even though her lungs felt like they were full of broken glass. She focused on a spot on the far wall and kept her eyes fixed there. The pain was worse than anything she had ever experienced. It was worse than the broken arm. It was worse than the car accident. It was worse than anything she had ever imagined. But it was still just pain. It was still just signals from her nervous system telling her brain that something was wrong, and had learned a long time ago that the brain could choose to ignore those signals if it wanted to badly enough. She planted her feet and straightened her back and refused to fall. She would not give what he wanted. She would not give any of them what they expected. She was a human, and humans did not break. Not like this. Not ever. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the girl stood her ground against the ancient trial. 30 seconds passed, then 60, then 90. And Morgan did not scream. 100 heartbeats passed and was still standing. The whispers in the gallery had stopped completely. Every being in the room was watching her with expressions that ranged from disbelief to terror. This was not supposed to happen. No one had ever lasted this long. The trial was designed to break the strongest warriors and the most hardened criminals. It was not supposed to fail against a young human student with no combat training and no special abilities. His crystalline face had lost its smug expression. His internal light flickered in patterns that did not understand, but she could guess their meaning. He was confused. He was worried. He had not expected this outcome. Focused on her breathing, in through the nose and out through the mouth. The pain was constant now, like a fire that never stopped burning. Her hands were shaking behind her back where no one could see them. Sweat ran down her face and dripped onto the platform beneath her feet. But she kept her expression calm and her eyes steady. She would not let them see how much she was suffering. 150 heartbeats. Somewhere in the gallery, a young student collapsed. There were small beings with delicate nervous systems, and even the residual vibrations from the trial were too much for some of them. Medical attendants rushed to help the fallen student and carried them out of the hall. No one else moved. Thought about her family. She thought about her father standing in the doorway of their house on the day she left for the stars. He had not cried because he knew she would not want him to, but she had seen the tears in his eyes that he was holding back. He had hugged her and whispered in her ear, "Show them what we are made of, sweetheart." She had promised him that she would. She thought about her mother. Her mother had died when was 17. Cancer had taken her over the course of 2 long years, had watched her fade away piece by piece, and she had learned something important during that time. She had learned that the human spirit could endure almost anything if it had a reason to keep fighting. Her mother had fought until the very end because she wanted to see her daughter graduate high school. She had held on through pain that would have killed most people just so she could be there for that one moment. Had that same spirit inside her. She could feel it burning in her chest even as the resonance frequencies tried to tear her apart. She would not give up. She would not break. She would stand here until the trial was over or until her body stopped working entirely. 200 heartbeats. High Arbiter leaned forward on his floating platform. His ancient eyes were wide with something that looked almost like fear. He had been a judge for over 300 years, and he had never seen anything like this. He had watched thousands of beings go through the resonance trial, and every single one of them had broken. Some lasted longer than others, but they all reached a point where the pain became too much. They screamed and fell and begged for mercy. But this human was not screaming. She was not falling. She was just standing there with her jaw clenched and her eyes fixed straight ahead as if the trial was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. One of the other tribunal members spoke in a trembling voice. "We should stop this. Something is wrong with the equipment." "The equipment is functioning perfectly," another member replied. "I have checked the readings 3 times. The frequencies are at maximum intensity. The human is simply refusing to respond." "That is impossible," the first member said. "No biological organism can withstand this level of neural stimulation. The pain alone should have rendered her unconscious by now." Heard their conversation, but she did not react. She was beyond reacting now. She had retreated to a place deep inside herself where the pain could not reach her. It was still there, of course. It was still tearing through her body like wildfire, but her mind had separated from her physical form in a way that she could not explain. She was watching herself from a distance as if this was happening to someone else. She thought about Earth. She thought about the rain falling on the roof of her childhood home. She thought about the smell of pine trees in the mountains near her town. She thought about the sound of her brother laughing at something stupid on the television. She thought about all the small moments that made up a human life, the moments of joy and sorrow and love and loss that shaped who you were. The aliens in this room would never understand those moments. They came from worlds where the climate was controlled and the predators were extinct, and nothing bad ever happened unless someone made it happen on purpose. They had never felt the terror of a storm that could destroy everything you owned. They had never known the grief of losing someone you loved to a disease that no one could cure. They had never experienced the quiet strength that came from surviving things that should have killed you. That was the difference between humans and the rest of the galaxy. Humans knew what it meant to suffer, and because they knew suffering, they had learned how to endure it. 250 heartbeats. The crystalline pillars were screaming now. The sound was so high-pitched that some species in the gallery covered their ears in pain. The vibrations shook the floor and made the walls hum with sympathetic resonance. Could feel her bones rattling inside her body. She could taste blood in her mouth where she had bitten her tongue. But she was still standing. Took an involuntary step backward on his platform. His crystalline form was flickering wildly now, and his face had twisted into an expression of pure disbelief. This was not possible. This could not be happening. This should have broken long ago. She should be writhing on the floor begging for mercy. She should be confessing to crimes she did not commit just to make the pain stop. Instead, she was looking at him with those strange human eyes, blue like the sky of her poisonous, calm like the surface of a frozen lake, utterly without fear. 300 heartbeats. The crystalline pillars powered down with a descending whine that seemed to echo through the entire station. The vibration stopped and the air went still. The grand hall was completely silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Thousands of beings held their breath as they watched the small human girl standing alone on the central platform. Swayed slightly as the pain faded. Her legs wanted to collapse, but she forced them to stay straight. She blinked once and then twice, and then she raised her head and looked directly at the tribunal. "Is that all?" she asked quietly. The silence that followed was absolute. It stretched on for what felt like hours. Every being in the room was staring at Morgan as if they were seeing her for the first time, as if they were seeing humanity for the first time. And in a way they were. High Arbiter sat frozen on his floating platform for a long moment. His scales had gone pale, which was a sign of extreme shock in his species. The other tribunal members stared at with expressions that mixed fear and wonder in equal measure. None of them had ever witnessed anything like this. None of them had ever imagined that such a thing was possible. Priestess was the first to move. She stepped forward onto the central platform and approached with slow, careful steps. Her silver eyes were wide and her hands were trembling slightly at her sides. "You completed the trial," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silent hall everyone could hear her clearly. In 10,000 years of recorded history, no being has ever endured the full resonance trial. You are the first. Nodded slowly. She was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. Every cell in her body ached and her mind felt like it had been stretched to its breaking point. But she was still standing, and that was all that mattered. High Arbiter finally found his voice. His words came out rough and unsteady. "By the ancient laws of the people, the accused has proven her innocence through the trial of pain. Morgan is hereby declared not guilty of the charges brought against her." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some of the students were already standing to leave as if they could not bear to stay in the hall any longer. Others remained in their seats with their eyes fixed on as if she might do something else extraordinary at any moment. But High Arbiter was not finished. He raised one clawed hand for silence and waited until the hall was quiet again. "There is another matter to address," he said. "During the trial, our technical staff completed a full analysis of the sensor logs provided by House." He paused and turned his ancient eyes toward the crystalline figure standing on the nearby platform. "The logs are fabricated. The timestamps have been altered, and the signature patterns do not match the station's monitoring systems. Has committed perjury before this tribunal." Slight patterns went chaotic with panic. His crystalline body flickered between colors so fast that it was hard to look at him directly. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. "This is absurd," he finally managed to say. "The must have tampered with the evidence. She is trying to frame me for her own crimes." High Arbiter shook his head slowly. The analysis was performed by 3 independent teams using equipment that the human could not possibly have accessed. The fabrication was done using coding techniques that only someone from your species would know. You created false evidence to destroy an innocent student, and you invoked the resonance trial hoping that she would confess to crimes she did not commit just to escape the pain. He gestured to the security drones floating near the edges of the platform. "Of House, you are under arrest for perjury and conspiracy to harm a fellow student. You will be held pending a full investigation into your actions. Your family's diplomatic status will not protect you from the consequences of this crime." The drones moved toward and he backed away from them with his hands raised. "You cannot do this," he shouted. "My father will destroy you. My family has connections in every corner of the government. You will regret this decision." "Your father will have to answer for his own role in this matter," the Arbiter replied calmly. "The tribunal has evidence that the fabricated sensor logs were created using equipment registered to your family's diplomatic office. He may be implicated in your crime." Screamed something in his native language, but the drones did not stop. They surrounded him and activated restraining fields that locked his crystalline body in place. He struggled against the fields, but they held him firmly. Then they escorted him out of the hall through a side door that led to the detention center. The crowd watched him go in silence. Many of the students who had cheered for him earlier now refused to meet his eyes. They had believed him when he accused the human. They had assumed that the was guilty simply because of what she was. Now they were learning that they had been wrong. Grant finally broke through the security perimeter and rushed onto the central platform. His face was wet with tears and his voice cracked when he spoke. "Are you all right? We need to get you to medical right away." Turned to look at him and managed a tired smile. "I am fine, just a little sore." A little sore repeated in disbelief. "You just endured a torture session that has broken warriors and criminals for 10,000 years. You are not fine. You need a full medical evaluation immediately." Did not argue. The truth was that she could barely feel her legs anymore, and she suspected that she might collapse if she tried to walk too far. But she wanted to leave the hall on her own terms. She wanted everyone watching to see that the human was still standing. Priestess approached them with a respectful bow. "I have studied your species since Earth made first contact with the Galactic Union," she said softly. "I have read every report and watched every recording, and I thought I understood what it meant to call your planet a—" She paused and looked at with something like awe in her silver eyes. "I was wrong. I did not understand at all." Nodded. "Most people do not. Your people carry something inside them that the rest of us have lost," continued. "A strength that comes not from comfort but from struggle. A resilience that is born from a world that tried to kill you every day of your existence. It is humbling to witness." Put his arm around shoulders and helped her walk toward the exit. As they moved through the hall, students from a dozen different species stepped aside to let them pass. Some of them bowed. Others simply watched with quiet respect. Word of what happened in the Grand Hall spread across the station within hours. By the next day, it had reached the neighboring systems. By the end of the week, it was being discussed in council chambers and academic halls across the entire galaxy. The humans were no longer just curiosities from a dangerous world. They were no longer primitive creatures who did not belong in civilized society. They were something else now, something that the galaxy had not expected. They were survivors. They were beings who could look pain in the face and refuse to break. Morgan spent 3 days in the medical center recovering from the trial. Doctors from 6 different species examined her and tried to understand how she had done what she did. They ran tests and took samples and wrote papers that would be studied for generations, but none of them could fully explain the human capacity for suffering. When she was finally released, Grant was waiting for her outside the medical center with a small package in his hands. It was a message from Earth. Her father had heard about what happened, and he had recorded a video for her. Watched the video alone in her room. Her father's weathered face filled the small screen, and his voice was rough with emotion. "I always knew you were strong," he said. "From the day you were born, I could see it in your eyes. You have your mother's spirit. You never give up no matter how hard things get." He paused and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. We all are. You showed the whole galaxy what humans are made of." Smiled and touched the screen where her father's face glowed softly. She had kept her promise. She had shown them. And this was only the beginning.